So going back to the Malaysian flag incident, all right, there are a few things to consider here, right? Because firstly, of course, the UMNO side, the UMNO youth chief, has tried to escalate matters by suggesting there needs to be some investigation, into this Malaysian store owner who hoisted the flag in an upside down position. According to those who defend this store owner, of course, the Chinese side would say that, it was only for a few seconds, so why make such a big deal out of it? And true enough, if it was not intentional, then we shouldn't be too hard up on it, right? That I fully agree. But then, if you are really so innocent, why then are you so afraid of investigation? I mean, the investigation would go in, of course, unless, of course, you also suspect that the investigation would not be fair, which is, in a way, a fair judgment. But even under Anwar, even under Anwar's watch, even under Anwar's government, you don't trust that the police will be fair. So there are many layers here. It is not just a simple who is right, who is wrong. There are so many layers. There's so much politics going on. There's Anwar's new government, and so the only thing I agree with them is that it is Anwar's fault, right? Anwar is the biggest player here who is not doing his job well, right? Because all these players, as I said, Malaysia has a very free, landscape and environment when it comes to political debate, political rhetoric. You have extreme views expressed on all sides. So that is not the issue. The issue is the leader, right? Anwar should be able to stem all this, should be able to come up with a strong statement to, unite the country on things that are right. So he has not done so. So this is the only thing I agree with the Chinese side. But I don't agree with being so sensitive with other people, suggesting that there may be wrongdoing here and then suggesting a fair trial to, I mean, if you are really innocent, then prove your innocence lah, because the picture that I saw is of this man hoisting the flag, and in a picture taken that is, very, very professionally taken. It didn't look to me like a few second mistake. All right, if that picture that I saw wasn't AI manufactured, right, and is the exact picture that went round on social media that made the Malaysian nationalist site so riled up about this, then I think there is grounds to suspect, there may be some ill intention, because who would hoist this thing upside down and then have a picture taken, spread around social media, and then after that say that, I hung it wrongly? It's going to be very weird, right? If it's only a few seconds, as these people say, then why did the wrong one make it to the internet? so there's a lot of layers here, all right? Whether there's ill intention on any side, maybe the store owner is really innocent, then prove it, or maybe the store owner really had bad intentions to purposely, want to be seen hanging the flag upside down like a hero, like a martyr. Then, I think the appropriate measures will need to be taken against him, because he has indeed, done something in violation of the dignity of the Malaysian flag, a symbol of the sovereignty of the land. So there's a lot of layers here, but as I said, I do understand both sides anger and angst and the political play amongst the different parties. The thing I don't understand is people far away in Singapore, living under a totally different system, living in the luxury of racial harmony and all these things, and then wanting to take sides, in this race tussle in Malaysia. I think it is very misinformed. I think really we need to stop this tribal politics of seeing things through the lens of race, Because even if we are a multi-racial, multicultural society, there is no need to emphasize or to zoom into race all the time, right? And of course, it's particularly prominent among the older folks. They tend to see, if they are Chinese, the identity of China, Chinese, this kind of, and then tying it together with the state of the PRC nowadays, which is another absurd thing. All right, but to them everything is together. This alignment, allegiance to China, this togetherness of everyone of ethnic Chinese origin, and we should band together as one and fight for one another. And that to me is dangerous in a sense, because while we can understand to a certain extent this sharing of identity, this commonality in terms of certain background, certain history, and certain culture, it shouldn't extend so far, as to say that even across countries, even across political systems, we want to align with them, and not just that, to take China as the last say, as the one that should control the narrative of whether it's Malaysia or China or Singapore or any other government. I think this is totally absurd, right? And to assert racism when yourself is racist, to call the Malays racist whenever they raise up something got to do with the Chinese. Yes, of course they may be hypersensitive or want to hype up some anti-Chinese sentiments on their end, but your overreaction and your way of retaliating and wanting to be so narrow-minded yourself is also the reason why the other side has so much ammunition against you, isn't it? Right? So I think, since you want to talk about the Singapore system being better, I agree with you, right? But not in the sense that I agree with the censoriousness of the Singapore system, in which nobody can say anything. So all the disharmony and discord gets, hidden under the carpet, and then you tell me this is a better system. No, not in a sense that we clamp down on any dialogue that is good about Singapore. I think what is good about Singapore is that whether or not, we have this draconian, of course we have this draconian measures, and of course it is something that keeps everyone quiet. But at the same time, I think compared to Malaysia, at least we in Singapore, whether or not it's due to this draconian measures, I think by and large Singaporeans have this common sense 自动ness, of being very civil in terms when we talk about race, and I think that is something good. Even though we are more to the other extreme where we are too hush about anything got to do with race, and I think that is also something not good, because things don't get surfaced, which is why I commend the recent Pritam Singh's posting on some IPS survey findings about Singaporeans voting preferences along even the lines of race, because it is different, right? And as with all these things, it is not to say which is good and which is bad, which is worse, and which is better, which is worse. No, it's just a factual finding out and presentation of the truth, and then from there, as political parties, of course, whether it's the PAP or the ruling or the opposition, you want to maximize your chances of being elected. So all this information is very important. So so which is why, despite my many disagreements with the Workers' Party on certain of their stances, them being a largely socialist party, which is something I totally don't agree with, but despite that, in the context of the larger fight for freedom and democracy in Singapore, I would say Workers' Party is doing the best job in challenging, this one party dominance status quo as enshrined, by the PAP. So this is something we should learn from, we should learn from the WP, and for this I really commend them, But Malaysia is the other extreme, everyone is free to talk about anything, but then you get very sectarian, one-sided narrative on both sides, both the Malay and the Chinese side, and it's very funny that the Indians, both the third largest population in Singapore as well as in Malaysia, they are the ones who are most democratic yearning and freedom yearning, as the IPS survey has shown. which is very, very funny, because on the one hand, I always like to ridicule them as the most woke community. They are the ones most influenced by these woke ideas, and it's really toxic and bad. But at the same time, I think with bad things also comes certain good things. They are also the ones who are, of course, most open to change, open to challenge of the status quo, open to challenge of the political establishment, both in Singapore and I believe also in Malaysia. So that is something we can learn from. So you see, we have something to learn from. We don't need to deny race altogether. I am totally against the idea of, we are just one Singaporean, don't talk about Chinese, Malay, Indians. No, I'm not to that left extreme. I think we still have separate identities. But neither am I to the right extreme, which is Chinese comes first, Malays come first, Indian come first, Singaporean identity comes second. No. I think country should be before race, all right, and family should be above country. Okay, so there are hierarchies to certain things. Different people have different priorities. I'm okay with that, but what I'm saying is my preferences, and what I'm saying is let's not go into extremes. Let's not deny race altogether. Let's not deny multicultural identities altogether, but at the same time, let's not go into the route of being extremists when it comes to these racial identities. And I think this centrist, moderate, libertarian approach is the way to go, right? Especially for societies like ours, where we are really fighting for real change, where we are really fighting for real freedom and democracy, but not to an extreme end. It's just in a sensible way, because it's commonsensical. In Malaysia, you have this toppling of UMNO regime, and then so that you don't have this stranglehold of power on just one side. Same as Singapore, whether or not you agree with the PAP's stance. I agree with many of the PAP's policies, and I'm sure many of the, including opposition supporters, especially WP supporters, I think at least 50 to 70% of the PAP policies they have no problem with, right? It's the 30% they have problem, but most importantly, it's not even whether we agree with the PAP or not, right? It's about these checks and balances that are absent. It is about this monopoly of power that needs to be challenged. So it is not even about whether we like the PAP's policy. I think that is secondary, because in a real two-party system, who knows, maybe I will be voting for PAP because I don't want the WP socialist kind of policy, but in today's Singapore, in the current Singapore, what we have is too much of dominance on one side, and I think that is not good, because that side, no matter whether it's left or right, becomes too dominant, becomes too overpowering, and no one can challenge. And with that, of course, comes complacency. With that, of course, comes incompetency, as we can see with all this bullshit going around, right? So for that reason, I am definitely supporting the party that is making the best kind of challenge towards the PAP, and incidentally, that is the WP. No matter whether it's a left-wing or right-wing party, I will support them, right? But of course, in terms of personal preference, ideological-wise, I do not support socialists. I do not support socialism. I am more towards capitalist free market, right? Yeah, but that is, a totally different topic, okay? So to these Zhonghuajiaos who are so hard up on this racial identity, I really hope that they can, stop and think. As I said, I'm not asking anyone to totally hide or totally suppress their cultural and racial identity, which is Zhonghuajiaos like to accuse anyone who are criticizing them of doing. I'm not asking for that. I'm not the extreme left that says no to culture. But at the same time, these far-right Chinese chauvinists have seriously gone too far. When all they see is race, when all they see is culture, everything, anything, no matter right or wrong, they always stand on the, Chinese side. In Malaysia, they think Chinese is always right. In Indonesia, they think Chinese is always right, no matter what. And then when it comes to China versus Taiwan, somehow China is always right, and Taiwan, even though they are also Chinese, Taiwan is always wrong. So even based on your own logic of focusing on race, you are contradicting yourself, because Taiwan is even more Chinese culture influenced than China itself, that has lost most of its traditional Chinese culture. So what are you talking about here? Please make up your mind. Please make up your mind. So what are you really protecting and defending? Is it Chinese culture, or just this, inferiority complex sense of pride of, because China rise up and then they falsely have this picture painted in their mind about somehow because of that the Chinese race also gets lifted up worldwide, which is actually the opposite. Because China's rise isn't a totally peaceful and totally pleasant one for the world, right? They are violating not just the rights of their own citizens, they are trying to endanger their own citizens living elsewhere in the world, and they are also trying to subvert, instigate disorder in these other countries. And you are telling me they are doing no wrong, and you are telling me that will help us Chinese people overseas have a good reputation. Something is not right here. And I think Taiwan is doing a much better job, presenting itself as this free democratic alternative to the PRC regime. Taiwanese, Hong Kongers, all these people who yearn for freedom and stand more aligned with universal values, are the ones who are actually giving us a better name worldwide, because we are the ones who prove, that we can work better with the civilized world. So what are you telling? Make up your mind. If you're talking about lifting up Chinese culture, if you're talking about lifting up the reputation and the welfare and the livelihood of Chinese worldwide, then the more you shouldn't be supporting the PRC, the more you shouldn't be supporting the CCP regime that is actually giving us a bad name by tying everything together. So this is something really, I think, from the bottom of my heart, I hope these people start to, both think and feel, and really start to get out of their very narrow worldview of race.